It was December and I had fallen back into bad habits. Even though I had been sober for almost 2 years, 20 months, 18 days if you're counting, which I was, I had no problems in readjusting to my old ways. It was like my body had been waiting for my mind to make this decision. It already knew what to do. It knew who to call, where to drive. All I had to do was say yes. And so I did. The first few weeks weren't bad. The train was still on its tracks. All the stops got made. It ran essentially on time. But the mistakes returned, slowly creeping into my life. I missed a shift or two at work. I overslept and didn't meet my girlfriend when I said I would. And then the money. I never had enough money. Sarah found out before anyone else and she made me leave before I could lie and tell her that she was wrong. Or lie and tell her I was going to get help. She knew. This was the 3rd time I had done this. What I remember about moving out of our apartment, the gray indifference of the sky, seagulls doing loops over my head, the way my hands hurt in the cold. I had lost one of my gloves a few weeks ago and standing in that parking lot, staring at my bright red hands, all I could think of was, where did all those lost gloves go? Does anyone notice them? Do they collect them? Do they photograph them? Do they make an Instagram account dedicated to missing halves of once whole things? I decided that was something I would do, just as soon as I got the time. And that's when the phone calls started. Everybody gets those phone calls. A local area code, but not a number that you know. When you pick up, it's usually only dead air, but not always. Sometimes there's someone on the other end, a voice hidden in the static. Is this Cole Olsen? The voice always seemed to be neither male nor female, old or young. It was just a distorted echo, like a memory of speech. I would say yes, but no one would say anything else and then the line would just disconnect. But that was only some of the time. Most of the time, there wasn't anyone there at all. Just dead air. Just static. Did you know people used to try to read the future in TV static? There were some performance art magic groups from the 80s called the Temple of Psychic Youth. They talked about how television could be used in rituals, that they were unseen shapes and the formless image of scrambled snow on screens. My dad even had a CD by them. I remember being scared by it. And that's the only thing about being a kid. Looking at all these things adults have. Their world seems so scary. So unknown. I guess that feeling really never goes away. At this point, I had started selling. Mostly to finance my buying, so that meant I always answered my phone. Any ring could be someone calling for a hookup. But to be honest, it usually wasn't. The vast majority of my clients texted, which meant 8 out of 10 phone calls were typically those unknown calls. Sometimes I'd shout into the receiver or say something stupid. Occasionally, I would read pages from whatever book was around. I liked the sound my voice made in that weird digital abyss. The way my vowels stretched out and vanished. I didn't understand the phone calls. Was it just some telemarketer computer program that just randomly dialed? Did calling people like that work, and do people really buy things over the phone like that? In a strange way, I began to enjoy the calls. My life had become increasingly isolated and dark, revolving mostly around my escalating drug problem. The ringing of the phone at least promised contact, even if it didn't deliver. With my dealing, I was able to save up enough to get an apartment. Just a shitty little place on the east side. It was a pre-war building with thin walls and a broken front door. As far as I could tell, I was the only inhabitant of the place. The mailboxes in the lobby were always empty and I never saw anyone, not even a landlord. All of my dealings with him had been done via email and they were all just 1 or 2 word answers. I saw your ad for the apartment on East 13th, I typed. Can I rent the apartment? Is it still available? Yes. The security deposit, it's $200, right? Yes. When can I move in? Yes. That doesn't make any sense, I typed. When can I move in? I never got a response back from that email, but 2 weeks later, a letter tumbled out of my P.O. box. My name was written in black block letters. When I opened the envelope, I saw a key and a post-it note with my new apartment number written on it. The apartment was cold, even after I bought a space heater. It felt like there was a breeze from inside that I couldn't get rid of, no matter how hard I tried. I would call the number listed online for the landlord, but I never got through. All I ever got was a dead line. I listened to the static, but I never heard the future. The thing was, even though I never saw anyone in the building, I could always hear something. At night, alone in bed, I would hear footsteps on the ceiling above me. Someone in that apartment, I'd think, or maybe it was just rats. But that would have to be pretty loud rats to sound as loud as they did. In the morning, I would walk up the paint-chipped stairway with the urine-stained carpets and stand outside the apartment where I thought the noises were coming from. Nobody ever came out, and when I got close and put my ear to the door, all I heard were echoes. My customers drifted in and out like dead leaves as the broken winter sunlight fluttered on the sidewalk. In the beginning, I never let anyone shoot up in my apartment, so they started getting high in the hallway, nodding out on the stairs. I'd leave to go somewhere and I'd have to walk by kids with pin eyes and xylophone ribs. They looked as gray as the sky. I worried about somebody dying, about what I'd have to do with the body. I had listened to Street Hustle by Lou Reed, and I knew what happened to girls who died in shooting galleries. I honestly loved the phrase shooting gallery. The words felt so dangerous and archaic. They made me think of being a kid, reading Batman comics and learning about the Rogues Gallery. That was what his collection of villains was called, those weird and grotesque figures determined to destroy him. I thought of the Rogues Gallery when I saw kids waiting to score. Their faces distorted by junk, their lives blown up, their eyes pinned and desperate. I was making supervillains who only wanted to destroy themselves. It was raining that Sunday. A cold, icy rain that slicked the streets and made them shine in a cold, dizzy way. There were 3 fatal accidents throughout the day. People just lost control of their cars and crashed. I read about it on my phone and it made me really wonder what being dead feels like. Not the death part, I know that would hurt, but the part after that. What comes next? Do we just stop? Someone knocked at my door. I went over and opened it. Eric was on the other side. I let him in. Eric was tall and played bass in some shoegaze band. He was a terrible bass player, but he was honestly beautiful, with jagged cheekbones and pink and blonde hair that fell on his face. Somehow that evened out. There was a girl with him. I mean, there was always a girl with him, but it was never the same girl. This girl was thin, with blonde hair that fell to her shoulders. She had dark roots and wandered about my apartment as I dapped up Eric. He told me her name was Katie, and she didn't say anything. I gave Eric his bags, and he gave me my money when she spoke. Who painted that? Her voice was quiet, a little burned out. Painted what? When she pointed out the window, I knew what she was talking about. A few weeks ago, graffiti had appeared on the building that faced my apartment on the west side. I think the building used to be a factory, but like most of the places in the neighborhood, it seemed abandoned. Across its surface, a pale, naked semi-faceless figure of indeterminate gender had been spray painted. The body stretched across almost 4 stories and it was luminous white, except for the chest. There, the skin was ripped and painted a vivid bright red. So red it almost made me dizzy to see. It was the red of chemical sunsets, the red of eyes at the end of the night. From the shimmering colors, a dark line rose up, wrapping itself around window edges. I don't know, I told her. It just showed up one morning. Someone did that overnight? I guess. She stared at the window, pushed her hair away from her face. No, you can't do that overnight. That would take forever. Hey, Eric asked. Don't mind if I... No, go ahead, I said. Maybe I'll do some with you. Katie joined us after. She looked strange. That painting reminds me of something, she said. But I can't remember what. My phone rang. Oh, I don't know, I said. My voice was heavy and light. I don't recognize it. Let me take this call. I answered on the fourth ring, right before it went to voicemail.
Cole Olson.
The voice was scratchy and distorted.
Yes?
And then the call disconnected. I hung up the phone and stood up. Who was that? Eric mumbled. I shrugged. Nobody. Somebody just asked my name, and after I had said something, they hung up. Did you say yes? Katie asked. Yeah, I think I did. I kinda laughed, but she looked serious. You shouldn't do that. It's a scam. People call you and record you saying yes. What can they do with that? I walked over to the kitchen and started filling up the teapot with water. They can call your bank and play back you saying yes. They can pretend to be you. First of all, I put the kettle on the stove. The flames rushed up, blue and bright. I barely have a bank account. And secondly, if somebody wants to be me, that's perfectly fine. My life is complicated and messed up enough. Maybe they can do a better job at it. Do you guys want any tea? Nah, man, we gotta go. Eric stood and stretched. Thanks a lot, man. It was nice meeting you, Katie said. She pulled up the hood of her jacket and they left. I was still kind of surprised I let Eric use in my place. That just wasn't me. That night, I fell asleep after midnight. The streetlights outside made the streets glow a strange, beautiful silver, and it was hard to sleep. The last thing I remember was noises from the apartment above me. They sounded like horses running, I thought. Strange white horses. I dreamed about a field, and in the field ran white horses. Above them circled big black birds. The horses were scared of the birds. They were trying to run away, but the birds were just too fast. The birds swooped down and bit the horses, tore at their silky manes. The horses screamed, and their screams sounded like human cries. The birds dug their talons into their skin again and again, until their skin fell off in great steaming sheets. The horses wailed, but when their flesh was gone, they went silent. They were just skeletons now, bone sculptures of horses standing in neon green grass, wet with their blood. The birds flew away into the sky, and the skeleton horses began to run as fast as they could, silent, save the sound of their bones clacking. Their fleshless eyes stared out into the distance at something that was becoming clear. I woke up panicked and short of breath, thinking of those dead things running when I saw something in the shadows of my bedroom move. There was something watching me in my room. I saw the figure move quietly towards the bedroom door. I wanted to scream. I wanted to turn on the light. I wanted to throw something, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. All I could do was watch. The figure stepped out of my room and closed the door behind it. I heard the front door open and then gently close. I sat in bed, heart pounding but otherwise silent, until I somehow fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, I ran to the door. I opened it up and there was no one in the hallway. There was no one anywhere. So, how long have you had this problem? The tech guy looked at my phone. His name tag said his name was Odin. Was that possible, or had he just written it to fuck with people? Today, I said. It started today. And everything works fine but the Touch ID. Yeah, exactly. I put my finger on it and it doesn't open. Your passcode works? Yes. The Apple Store was crowded. Teenagers taking photos of themselves on the iPads. Moms with kids trying to get computers fixed. Everything was loud and modern and expensive. Said Odin. He frowned at the screen, tapped it. Can I see your finger? I held out my index finger and pressed it into the home button. Nothing happened. Nothing happened, Odin said. Then, I looked around and saw my reflection in a screen. Even in my puffy winter coat and ski hat, I looked thin. Okay, look, we have some options. He scratched his thin beard. We can either take your phone and fix it, or since the passcode works, you can keep it and just not have the Touch ID function. Well, what do you think I should do? Odin stared at me. Did one of his eyes not move like the other one? I can't tell you what to do, he said. But if you give it to us, we can change it. That might be hard, but eventually it can work right. If you keep it, you're running a risk. I stared at him. The store felt way too hot all of a sudden. My chest felt tight. Can I just get my phone back? Of course, man. Odin looked worried. Your choice. I grabbed the phone and almost ran out of the store, nearly knocking over a kid. He had stepped right in front of me. I didn't understand how I hadn't run him down. I didn't stop moving until I got into the desolate parking lot. Above me, bone-white seagulls screeched at me from their perches on LED light poles. A few days later, I heard that Eric had died. He crashed his car after he had left my place. His band was looking for a new bass player. But they didn't say if Katie had died. Nobody I'd talked to even knew who she was. I knocked at the upstairs apartment the next night. No customers had come that day, and I tried to tell myself that it was just the snow, which had started in the morning and hadn't stopped once. But I knew it wasn't that. Junkies are like mailmen. Neither wind, nor rain, nor sleet, nor snow stopped them from their appointed rounds. Something else was happening. The clients had been decreasing over the past couple days, always less than yesterday, which would be less than tomorrow. I didn't understand where they were going. I didn't understand what was happening. But I had heard the noises in the apartment again, and I was going to find out. No one answered. I shouted hello and I tried the door. It was locked. I went back to my apartment and my phone rang. Hello? Can you hear me? The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. Yes. It said something else, but I couldn't understand it. The line went dead. I heard a noise outside, from the street. I went to the window and I looked out. The reflection of streetlights in the snow outside lent the outside world an eerie glow. I could see a dark figure running away, too far to see a face. Their body was obscured by a heavy parka and their hood was up. And that's when I saw the painting on the building was finished. The line from the bleeding chest extended up the length of the structure, and it was no longer a line. Instead, it was easy to identify what it had become. A dangling string attached to a floating black balloon that terminated at the top of the building. My phone rang again. I didn't answer. The next day I drove to Sarah's place. I hadn't been back since I left. I parked in the visitor space and I rehearsed my speech. I made a mistake, I said alone in the car. I want to come back. I'll do whatever you want me to do. I went into the lobby and I walked to the elevator, past the mirrors. I barely could recognize myself. I looked like a stranger. When I got to her floor, I stopped. Was I really going to do this? I mean, how could I? Before I could stop myself, I went to the door and I knocked. No one answered. I walked to the end of the hall and I looked down at the parking lot. The snow was falling in great clumps. And then Sarah's car pulled in. She parked and got out of her car, shaking snow off her head. She was smiling, and she looked happy. Happier than she had looked with me. There was a dark shape in the passenger seat. My stomach tightened, and the door opened. There I was in the parking lot. I looked happy too. Happier than I had seen myself in years. Sarah walked over and kissed me, and I held my hand out and let the snow fall all around me. Inside I stared. Then I took out my phone and I dialed my number. It rang twice and then I saw me in the parking lot take a phone out.
Hello? Is this Cole Olsen?
Out in the parking lot, Sarah stopped as I pulled the phone closer.
Yes.
I heard myself say. I hung up. The snow was starting to fall inside, filling the hallways with brilliant white flakes that looked like static. Above me, somewhere in the ceiling, I heard loud footsteps behind the snow.